Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Forgotten Feminists episode. Today, our special guest is Lina. Lina is the author of a book called Liberation. Lina, can you hold it up for us, please? There it is. Liberation, Secrets of the Soul. Lina grew up Christian in Egypt. So you're my very first Christian from Egypt. I had a woman who grew up in Iraq, Christian, and she told us all about her story there. So now I want to hear all about you and your story. So let's start off with what we almost started to talk about before we turn the camera on. What's it like to grow up as a Christian in Egypt? Because I know when I was there, I saw a lot of discrimination. And, you know, obviously I've heard so many stories of people telling me what it's like there. And I just wanted to hear your perspective. What was it like growing up in Egypt?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me here. And it's my honor to be one of the many forgotten feminists. About growing up in Egypt, let's start with school, for example. So schools in Egypt from grade 1 to grade 12, an essential part of the Arabic language curriculum is always long verses from Quran. So we were supposed to read them, study them, memorize them, and write exams about them. The Arabic literature was usually or almost always was like, for example, novels about famous figures in the Islamic history, telling their stories and things like that. In the history class, we had to learn a lot about the Islamic history and the invasion of the Arabs to the neighboring nations, including Egypt, of course, and things like that, and the different Islamic empires throughout history. So that was a huge part of history class too. So really, I'm not even exaggerating if I say that by grade 12, I knew more about Islam and Quran than I knew about Christianity and the Bible. Also at school, there is a standalone subject that's called religion. So at religion class, of course, because the majority of the class are Muslim students, so we, like the few Christians, were expected to, not expected, we had to leave the classroom completely and go with our Christian religion teacher to have our class somewhere else. This somewhere else could be literally anywhere. It could be anywhere that happened to be available, like in a lab that happened to be empty at the time, could be in the kitchen, in the playground, outdoors, like anywhere. And then after we're done, we go back to the class. It wasn't like the most pleasant experience, to be honest. Also, like in my opinion, having religion as a subject, first of all, it was a pass-fail subject, so it wouldn't count in your grades. So it was never taken seriously to begin with. It was just a waste of time for students and teachers, to be honest. And children usually learn about their religion at home. There are mosques and churches for that purpose. So I don't think the school is the right place for that at all.
Totally agree.
All it did was, it was just a tool to divide children and teach them from very early age to whoever is different. So in my opinion, it's not a good idea.
I have a question about schooling before you continue on. In your history class, I know you're learning about the Islamic conquests of, That's always what we learn about. The history class is always about like how the Muslims conquered the world and how successful they were. But did you ever learn anything about the history of Egypt before it was conquered by Muslims?
So yeah, like the ancient Egyptian history was included too. And
Did it
the
include
current
the history
Egyptian history, like the most recent, but nothing in between, like in between.
So nothing about
like
the Coptic Christians? Okay.
No, not a word, not a word.
So they just jumped 3,000 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay.
Well, sort of, yeah. Like the last thing I remember after the ancient Egyptian was probably the Roman Empire, which like Egypt was part of. But after that, you jump right away to the seventh century. Yeah. So that's cool. About daily life, like living in Egypt. So of course, you hear during the day the Islamic prayer 5 times a day from the
I remember that.
Plus once a week there is the longer prayer of Friday, followed by a long sermon as well. So and I don't know, like
did you have to sit there and listen to the khutbah and everything?
Well, you can't help it.
There's nowhere to go.
Loud microphones coming from everywhere. And you have been to Cairo, in Cairo, there is a mosque literally around every corner. So from one spot, you hear the speakers
screaming
from all directions, So I do remember just one incident. I may have been like 10 years old or so. I remember that it was a Friday sermon, and the Imam was specifically talking about some verses, specifically speaking about Christians and Jews, and like how their belief is so corrupt and they are basically infidels and unbelievers and many other things I don't want to get to, but I do remember. So for me, 10 years old, it was the first time I had ever heard something like this. And it was, of course, you can hear it from home. It's so loud. So I was shocked. But then when I kept listening, I was old enough to understand that he was talking about us. And I was like, it got to a point where I was terrified. And I remember I ran to my mom and I asked her, like, what is this guy saying about us? And of course, all she did was she tried her best to calm me down. And, all she said was, oh, don't worry, don't be afraid, don't be scared. We're good, we're fine, we're safe. But the thing is, when you could hear this in public from home, about you, so it's like at this point it's not just a matter of hurting feelings anymore. It becomes a safety concern.
I'm so sorry, Lina. That's legit. That's legitimately terrifying for a child. Like that is a traumatic episode that you just described. I'm reminded of Gad Saad, who's Jewish and grew up in Lebanon. And he was talking about when he was in kindergarten, they were going around the class and all the kids were saying what they want to be when they grow up. And they get to the little boy sitting next to him and he says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he says, I want to kill Yahud. I want to kill Jews. And Gad is sitting there like absolutely terrified in his own classroom at school, and it's the same thing. Like it's your safe space. You think that you're safe in your classroom at school. Obviously, you think you're safe in your home, and then you're hearing basically calls, people calling for your death or talking about how you're going to burn in hell. And, that's something difficult for an adult to deal with, let alone for a child to deal with. That had never, like, it's shocking to me. I should have known this. It never crossed my mind that that's happening. I knew that the khutbah was being you know, through the microphones and all of this stuff, but it just, with you recounting the story now of being a little girl and hearing this and how you must have felt, you know, like that's terrifying.
Yeah, it wasn't fun. So yeah, maybe the last thing I would like to share with you, as far as I remember. So when you grow up and you want to issue your piece of ID in Egypt, the government issued ID card, of course, has your name, your address, your date of birth, and all these things. Plus, there is a field for your religion. So your religion has to be written in your piece of ID. The funnier thing is that there's only two choices for your religion, either Islam or Christianity. So you're either Muslim or Christian. You basically cannot be anything else. Like if you're anything else, you're in trouble. I imagine in the past, there was a third option for Jewish, because like there were a lot of Egyptian Jewish people in Egypt, but they all left after 1948. So by my generation,
they were expelled. They were forced out. But
yeah. So yeah, like during all the long years I lived in Egypt, I had never met one single Jewish person there. So anyway, back to the ID. So you have two choices, either Muslim or Christian. Fine. The thing is, if any person ever want to change their religion, for example, or convert to something else, if you're a Christian and you want to convert to Islam, you can change that so easily, super like convenient, in a day. It can be changed, because not only is it allowed, it's widely celebrated. It's like it's a celebration for a Christian to become a Muslim. But the other way around, for a Muslim to convert to Christianity, that's unheard of. That's not a thing, because like if you're a Muslim wanting to leave Islam, you're basically running the risk of being killed. So it doesn't happen.
They just don't. They can't change their ID. They have to do it secretly. Yeah.
So yeah, these are the things that I still remember. Of course, that was so long ago. But yeah.
I remember too that we had like there was these women that I worked with, and my mom asked me, like one of the women was a close friend of mine, and her name was Mona or something. And like it was just like a nondescript, like it wasn't an Islamic name, like it wasn't Fatma or Zainab or something. And my mom was like, "Hey, Muslima, is she Muslim?" And I was like, "I don't know. I never asked her." And then she's like, "Okay, what you have to do," because I said, like, she says like inshallah and alhamdulillah and things like that. And my mom's like, no, that's not good enough. You have to say something like Salah al Nabi.
Okay. Yeah.
That's like the secret test. And then you'll know like if she's a Christian or not. And then you'll know like then I'll know whether you're allowed to be friends with her or not, based on if she. So I was like, you guys have like a secret little like almost like a handshake, you know what I mean? Like a secret message to know, like to test if somebody is a Muslim or a Christian. Did you guys know that Muslims are doing that? Did you know the Muslims are trying to suss out if you're Christian or not? Yeah.
Well, you can tell by the last name too,
Yeah. I guess if you're paying it, they quite often look at people and my family they'll look at people and they'd be like, yeah, they look like they're Christian. Yeah, they have the look of Christian people. And I'm like, how does somebody's religion
or maybe the way they talk or something?
Yeah. But they're just like, they were constantly, trying to suss out like, where are the Christians in this world? You know what I mean? Like, they walk among us. But all jokes aside, like the discrimination against you, I don't know if this is getting too much into the weeds, but you weren't there under Sisi, so you've already been in Canada. Yeah. Because I heard that things are starting, like that there's maybe fluctuation in that things are a little bit better, but I don't really know.
From what I hear, I don't think things are better.
No.
If anything,
Okay.
they keep getting worse. That's what I hear. I don't know.
The extremists just keep getting more and more extreme.
Yeah.
So did you experience this, because you said you left Egypt because of the sexism, the patriarchy? I understand obviously that you would experience that in the society as a whole, because it's a very patriarchal society. It's a very, like you described, in the schools, in the government, in the media, every single aspect of the country is very, Islamic. With 90% of the population being Muslim, there's really no other narrative that you're hearing. All you're ever hearing is the chorus of Islam and the adhan 5 times a day and everything. So it's just this constant, repetitive shoving down your throat of that religion. But did you find yourself feeling grateful at times, like, well, thank goodness I'm not a Muslim woman, thank goodness don't have to wear hijab, or I'm not subject to the kinds of things that you were seeing all around you. Did you find it different within your community, or was the fact that you were in Egypt, like it was just seeping through?
Yeah, so I can start with my own household. I grew in a household that was very moderately religious. Going to church was occasional, fasting was optional. For example, when I was a child, I didn't want to go to Sunday school as a child because I was extremely shy. I was not very sociable. So my mom never forced me to, I never went to Sunday school in my life. My mom was fine with it. She would tell me stories from the Bible or read the Bible for me, and that was good enough, So yeah, my parents were the most loving, forgiving, supportive parents anybody could ask for. I have only one sister, so we're 2 girls. I didn't have brothers growing up. And she has always been my closest and best friend. So yeah, so in my household, I didn't really see that. However, I did see it so clearly around me in other households, for example, in extended family or friends and neighbors. I could clearly see that boys and girls were not treated the same way. They were not given equal opportunities growing up. That I could clearly see that, and it bothered me so much, to the point that as a child I was thankful that I didn't have a brother, so I wouldn't have to experience this unfairness at home, which is really sad. So yeah, but for me, we were just 2 girls, so everything was the same. Back to your question, yes, I am very grateful that to this day, to be honest, that I wasn't expected or pressured to wear hijab. I was definitely not forced into any sort of marriage, let alone child marriage. I am forever grateful, and it's on the top of my list when I count my blessings, that my parents did not do FGM on me when I was a baby or a child. I don't know when they do it, but yeah, but I do, as far as I know, FGMs are not practiced among Christian families, as far as I know. And I know also that not all Muslim families do it. I know that some families do it, some families don't. But I also know for a fact that it's very common in Upper Egypt and in the countryside, in small villages, smaller cities. I know that. And it's a shame. Like it's not only heartbreaking, it's the fact that we are still talking about it in the 21st century breaks my heart, really. It's shameful.
Of course.
Yeah. Growing up in Egypt, many, if not most of my friends, my close friends, were Muslims. Like, I loved them, they loved me, honestly. Like, we did it, like, but of course they were Muslims from moderately religious families. So they were very open-minded, modern, you know, none of them wore hijab, none of them. But yeah, and many of them we're still in like contact each other to this day. So growing up, you know, as I explained, from school and everything, I knew so much about Islam. So I knew about all the, like, the unfairness to women. For example, like, a man has the right to have 4 wives, and all the things, and the inheritance, like girls get half of what boys get, and all these things. So I knew about that, and everything seemed unfair to me. But when I was in high school, I decided to read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. I was curious. I wanted to know what it says. So I read it. And, the Bible has, like, the Old Testament, which is the Jewish Torah, and the New Testament. So when I read the Old Testament, to be honest, I enjoyed most of it, because the Old Testament has so many stories, and I love stories. So I enjoyed it. I read and read and read. But, some parts, specifically in Leviticus, so this is the book where all the rules and laws are, like the do's and the do nots. So many parts there are about women. And I didn't like this piece. It shocked me when I saw, like, one example is a woman is considered unclean during her menstruation. So when I read that with my own eyes, it was a shock. And other things too, so I didn't like that piece. But then when I got to the New Testament, which is the Christian piece of it, again, the first part, the 4 Gospels, is basically stories about Jesus. So I liked that piece. I enjoyed the stories, and everything was fine. But when I got to the letters after that, the letters of the apostles to churches, I also found, like, I have to say, the New Testament is 10 times better, but it's still, you would find things like, women are not allowed to teach in the church, or they are expected to learn in silence or in submission, something like that. Or a woman is not permitted to have authority over a man. So things like that I did not appreciate. I did not like. It didn't make sense to me. I mean, why? Why can't I teach? Because I don't have a brain, perhaps? Or why? Like,
you don't have a penis.
I didn't like it. But I finished it, and I didn't stop too long. At this point, I went on with my life. It's like, whatever, it is what it is. And I went on with my life. I've completed my university degree in English language and literature. And then I worked for a couple of years in Cairo International Airport with Lufthansa Airlines. And then I left the whole country.
Yeah. So, I can totally follow, your thought processes throughout this whole thing. Like, you're living in this highly Islamic country, you're surrounded by child marriage, FGM, forced hijab, men marrying 4 women, men beating their wives, all of this stuff being, completely just normalized in the society around you. And so you're kind of like looking like you're grateful that you don't have to live like that and that things are different for you. And so you start looking at your own religious books and you realize, whoops, the patriarchy exists here as well.
Yes.
But the significant difference being, thankfully, that it's not in your laws, it's not in your schools, it's not dominating you. So what you described there about, oh, I just put the book away and I went on with my life and I continued. If only Muslims could do that. Really, that's what, if you could read these crazy ahadith and be like, whoa, that's some crazy shit from 1,000 years ago anyway, and move on with your life. But you can't do that because they have constricted every single part of your life with these books. And then you felt like, okay, that's it. I just need to get out of this country. I need to move on with my life. I need to go to the free West where, where they have free speech and feminism and free thought and the land of milk and honey. Okay. Tell me about that experience.
Okay. All right. So, leaving Egypt for good and moving to Canada was my decision. I was an adult. I was single at the time, so I came by myself. Most of my extended family were already here in North America. All my younger cousins were born and raised in either Canada or the States, so of course that was a good support for me. My sister had moved to Alberta as well with her little family 3 years before I did. So having her was a huge support for me, especially the first year. So my transition to Canada was really easier than it would have been had I not had this support, of course. So I came to Canada. I liked it. I liked Canada. I never regretted that decision. I like the Canadian culture. I like Canadian people. Most of them were very inviting, very welcoming and supportive and nice and kind. I met someone, we fell in love, we started a family, I had my children. So Canada became home. It's the home of my 2 children. They were both born and raised here. And then gradually I let myself plunge into the Canadian society. So I worked full-time, I studied part-time to establish a career. I made friends, I made new friends from neighbors and co-workers, and everything was great and good. And it was good. But what got my attention about the Canadian society, which was very different from Egypt, is that here the society is very wide open, very diverse. I made friends and met people from literally all over the world, Canadian from different backgrounds, North American, European, Asian, African, South American, everywhere. So of course I found back in Egypt, I only dealt with Egyptians and I only knew about 2 religions. That's it. When I came here, it was so everything was new to me. I found so many nationalities and languages and religions and beliefs. And so I became curious to learn more about these things. So I have always been so interested in religions specifically. I don't know why, but all my life. So I started to read about other religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Confucianism. I read about almost everything. It was kind of a personal journey to learn more about the world and understand more about life. So going through this journey, I hit 3 milestones. The first stop was, after I learned about the different religions and all that, my conclusion was all religions of the world were just some efforts, human efforts and attempts to reach and understand the divine, but they were not sacred messages sent from above. That was my first conclusion. And I also realized that the three Abrahamic religions are not the only ones that are so unfair to women. In fact, I learned that historically, the most aggressive cultures were ancient Persia, ancient India, and ancient China, and they all had existed before the three Abrahamic religions came to existence. So, like the pattern was so clear. And then also when I searched about how the holy books were collected for each religion, I realized that they were all human writings. They were written by people like you and me, but thousands of years ago. And by the way, by saying that, I am not disrespecting them. I'm not I'm not asking to throw them away and, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm only putting them in their place. They are human writings. They should be preserved and respected as some contribution to the human heritage.
Just like philosophies and sciences and so many other things that we've learned over the years. Yeah.
Exactly. But they shouldn't be made holy or sacred. They shouldn't be viewed as flawless or unquestionable. They should not be presented as the word of God. That's when the danger is. And then the second stop was so after learning about all these religions, I became very interested in listening to debates between different beliefs or between atheists and believers. I learned, I listened to so many of this, and I was able to distinguish between two words that many people use interchangeably, referring to the same meaning, but to me, they are completely two separate concepts. The two words are religion and faith. So religion is basically rituals, rules, laws, beliefs, doctrine, dogma, so the prayers, fasting, laws, the do's and the do nots, beliefs, for example, when we die, we go to heaven or hell. That's a belief. And the three of them, the rituals, the laws, the beliefs are always connected in one religion, one specific religion. Faith, however, to me, is not associated with any particular belief or certain religion. Faith is this divine spark that exists in all of us.
You're so Canadian. But not. That is so. I grew up in Vancouver and lived in Victoria for so many years, and that's just quintessential Canadian right now.
Oh, okay.
You're now fully Canadian, Lina.
Good to know. So I mean, it exists in all of us, but not all of us respond to it the same way. It could be your faith in humanity, your faith in the goodness of the universe, your faith in yourself and your abilities. So yeah, that's how I see it. The third stop, and my favorite, it was like the last piece of the puzzle. I would like to start it by a very short story that happened between my daughter and me when she was 3. She was 3 years old, and she all of a sudden came to me one day, and she asked, "Who made God?" So of course I gave her the classical answer, God created everything and all this. She didn't buy it. She was not convinced. So she kept asking and asking and asked over and over and over again, probably 10 times. And every time I tried to give her a different answer, but along the same lines, but she was not convinced. She was 3 again. So finally, when I gave up, I said to her, you know what? Why don't you ask him? I don't know. I'm sure he'll tell you. He knows the answer. I don't have an answer for you. Her came back with another question. Why is God a he, not a she? So
She's a smart kid.
This, oh my goodness. At this point, well, first of all, I couldn't help laughing. So my first response was laughter, but then I took her in my arms. I gave her the longest and tightest hug ever. And I looked her in the eye and I said, girl, you are a genius. I was impressed, to be honest. It's a question I had never asked. And you know, from that moment, I fell in love with the idea of having a female God, like, of course, figuratively. I don't mean the literal mean of the sense of the word, but
I mean, what is a woman?
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, if God to me is love, beauty, fairness, peace, creativity, comfort, care.
A creator.
Thank you. Creator. So all these characteristics are feminine, really. So anyway, so I loved the idea. So I went back to my research again, because that's what I do. So I read books, I listened to lectures, I watched documentaries. Just to name a few, I would like to mention three of them. So a book that's called The Female is the Origin by Nawal Saadawi. She is an Egyptian psychiatrist and writer. Also a lecture that's called Matriarchal Societies in Prehistory by Carmen Bolter. She's a Canadian director and producer of films. She is the director of the documentary, The Pyramid Code. And also another lecture, When Women Ruled the World, by Kara Cooney. She is an American Egyptologist. So just to name a few, but of course there are so many of them. So for the first time in my life, I learned about the prehistoric matriarchal communities. And that was the turning point. You know, it was a moment of revelation when I learned about these communities, when the female was worshipped and celebrated, when there were like the god was a female, because women were seen as those you know,
creators of life.
Yeah, mysterious creatures who had this miraculous ability to give life and bring people into the world. Back then, of course, humans hadn't made the connection between sex and reproduction. So men saw themselves, that's like 10,000 years ago. So men saw themselves as barren creatures, you know, they don't have this ability to give life. So of course, women were sacred, you know. But then after that, when men discovered, I think, their role in the process, so that started what I call the patriarchal awakening. So, and this patriarchal awakening led to the transition period, which was the best time in history, between complete matriarchy to complete patriarchy. So this transition period, which unfortunately didn't last for long, but it had very good and healthy balance between the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine. And that's when the concept of fatherhood came out for the first time in history, and the concept of family, father, mother, and children. But then, unfortunately, patriarchy grew stronger and more aggressive towards women. And that's what ended up being the male-dominated world that we still live in to this day.
And is that what inspired you to write your book then? Was it this final awakening? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oh yeah. So a big part of it, yes, is in my book. And yeah, I mean, that was the final piece of the puzzle, you know. It explained everything, you know. It explained the constant need to control women, because this hate of women is the real root of it is the fear of women.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was, yeah, yeah, that was the last piece of my journey. And then, as you said, that was one of the main reasons that inspired me to write.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember, I mean, I was pretty young when I had the understanding that men really hate women. Like they really want to control women. They're very aggressive towards women. There was it was almost a feeling of, what have we done to them? Like, why do they hate us so much?
I know.
But of course I was, the reason why I was so young when I had that realization is just because of the men that I was surrounded by and the way they treated the women that I was surrounded by, including myself. And you could read, it was, there's no question that this control of women, but I didn't understand that it came from fear of women until much later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's yeah. So it's fear of them that makes them
hate us so
want
much.
to control us, you know. Yeah, they have to
exactly.
control our sexuality, control our bodies, control our voices, you know, because they fear us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's thank goodness you found yourself a good Canadian man, as I did. There are a lot of them out there, of course.
Yeah.
But
he's actually Egyptian Canadian. So
oh, how cool. You guys are both a hybrid. Mine is like full on Canadian from Newfoundland. So it couldn't get more salt of the earth. But yeah, you know, when you grow up in such a patriarchal society, patriarchal community, you kind of, you hate men back. You know, I was also terrified of them. You know, I also hated them. It was like, it's now reciprocated, because that's how that was the society I was raised in. That's the water that cultivated me. So tell me about your book. It inspired, this revelation helped to inspire your book, which is a collection of short stories of women liberating themselves. Is that correct? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure,
what made you,
So I hadn't discovered my passion for creative writing until later in life. I was 35 when I started. It started by writing some poems in Egyptian dialect first. And then after doing this for a couple of years, I decided to write short stories in English. So I did. I wrote the first one. I shared it with some friends and coworkers, and the feedback came positive. So it encouraged me to write more and more. So I wrote one story after another. And then after I had a few of them, I thought the idea of planning for a book as a collection of short stories came to mind. And I had a plan of the book, and I wrote one story after another. From the day I wrote the very first draft of the first story, in my book until the book came to light was 5 years. So that's going through the writing process of the first draft and then editing and reviewing and having it professionally edited, and then the long journey for finding a publisher, and then finally receiving a publishing offer and working with the publisher on the final editing process and the book's design and all this. That all took 5 years. During these 5 years, that was not only what I'm doing. I was working full-time, I was studying part-time for my professional development, and I was also, by that time, I was a single mother raising 2 children on my own. So I was a busy woman, yeah, for 5 years. But then finally it came out. The book, as you said, is just very like, they are 16 short stories, very, very familiar, we could all relate to. Each one of them takes place in a different city around the world at a different time. Of course, each story has its own theme and plot and everything, but the prevailing theme throughout the book is, and that's where the word liberation comes from. It's about liberating the human mind and soul from all the inherited beliefs and political influences. It's about unlearning and questioning everything that we've been told and taught. It's about breaking free from years of isolation and despair and guilt. I would like, if I may, to highlight 3 of the stories in the book because they are my favorite. I think they are very important and I like them. So the first one is Between Two Streams. It's set in somewhere in the Middle East, 10,000 years ago. It describes the matriarchal communities, and it tells the story of this woman and her brother who live in one of these communities and who witness the rising of the patriarchal notions and concepts for the very first time, like things that they had never heard of before. And the story describes their response to that. The other story is Liberation. So the book title is Liberation, and it's one of the stories. This one takes place in, again, somewhere in the Middle East, but 2,000 years ago. It tells the story of this woman who was rejected by religion and society. She was misunderstood, misjudged, and misrepresented, lived her whole life in like miserable isolation until she finally managed to restore her faith in humanity through her encounter with this inspirational mentor whose message was simply that the divine is within. So you basically don't need a religion or worshiping houses or, you know, like religious leaders. You don't need any of that to reach the divine. The third story is The Truth is One. So this one is set in the United Kingdom in the 21st century. And it tells the story of a middle-aged woman who is a professor at the university. She's a professor of religious studies, and she constantly receives complaints serious enough to threaten her career from a few students who get offended in her class by the debates that take place in her class between students from different religious backgrounds, and what she does about it. So yeah, so that's briefly my
Interesting.
book.
Fascinating. Love it. Thank you so much, Lina. I'm looking forward to reading it. I know so many people already got it. I'm in Europe at the moment, so it's difficult for me to get things. But once I get home, as soon as I get home, I'm going to order it right away.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that the response has been positive to your book. It sounds like it's very universal and very international. So I can imagine that any woman who reads it would see herself in it in some way or another. When you were
That's very
talking
true.
about, yeah, you were talking about the divine being in each one of us. It kind of reminded me of like namaste. The divine in me recognizes the divine in you. I haven't read anything about Hinduism, so I'm sure there's a whole bunch of things in there that are, patriarchal. Obviously I've heard of like the burning of the wives when their husbands die and things like that. So, I don't doubt that there's issues with every religion, but I do love that greeting of namaste, of just like
Mhm.
the light or the divine in me recognizes the divine in you.
Mhm.
So if you could hold the book up for us again and give us the title, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to be interested in picking that up. Liberation, Secrets of the Soul.
Yeah.
And this painting that we see on the cover of your book is right behind you as well.
Yes, yes, it's my own painting. I painted this. So, and it's actually one of the main scenes in the title story, Liberation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Lina. I'm going to open this up to the whole group now, and then we can hear from everybody and get some questions and comments from people in the group here. So if you have something to say to Lina, then just raise your hand. Okay, Rada, please unmute yourself.
I am so happy that I joined this because I've never found another person that believes in the same thing as I do when it comes to that, the divine is within you. And if you don't mind, like, I just bought your book, so I'm reading this part about the very beginning. Destiny lets your soul be shattered, so the scattered pieces eventually reunite to form a mosaic of your beautiful portrait and orchestrate your unique life symphony. Only at the climax will you figure out your own story. And that touches me so much because that is so true. Mm-hmm. My destiny was to be born in Saudi Arabia to a Shia family that hated me, and I was the oldest of 4, and all of my brothers were male. So I saw firsthand how it's so unfair. And, growing up until like my soul was shattered, they broken me. They made me feel like I wanted to die, but only when I realized that, no, I don't want to die. I want to live, just not like this. And the only strength that I found was not from a book, not from the Quran, not from some kind of divine power from outside, because I never had a support system, not my parents, they were not going to be there for me. And it was when I found that, no, I have that strength. The power is inside me. And it's a beautiful, I'm so glad that I got to see somebody else also get to that journey from a different perspective. And it shows that it's not just, you don't have to go through extreme trauma to realize that you have your own strength. You can also do it from your own inner experiences, like the observing, reading, and it's a very beautiful thing. And I just wanted to thank you for
oh, thank you. Thank you for reading my book.
I haven't read it yet. I love these stories. I love that idea. We both, this is Kifah. She's also, I wanted to introduce also as a forgotten feminist, but we both grew up in such extreme circumstances and we've both liberated ourselves, but the liberation that started was here. Mm-hmm. And once you free your mind, it becomes easier to free your body.
Very true. Very true. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rada. It makes me so happy when I hear from my readers. You have no idea.
That's beautiful, Rada. You guys, when Rada was speaking, it reminded me of, when I met Ansaf Haidar, Raif Badawi's wife. we were going and getting our nails done and we were chit-chatting, and we're realizing how all of this patriarchy, back to our discussion, Lina, about the whole hate and fear dynamic, all of that is about trying to prevent women from recognizing their power.
Mhm.
That's why it took you so long to get it, Ghada, because every single system in the society around you was built to prevent you from realizing that. They don't want you to know your power. I didn't figure out my power until I was like in my 40s. You know, I'm like, I could have used this information decades ago, but they don't want you to know. And like you said, you're so brainwashed. You believe what you're being told your whole life, that
women are fragile, you know, they break so easily. They're so delicate.
Emotional.
You have to make sure that they're, you know, they can never. And I remember my mother told me that, you know, الرجال غير المرأة.
Yeah,
you know,
all the time.
The women, you know, women can't be like men. Men always are able to take care of themselves wherever you would put them. And then listen to this. Like, I'm the only woman. I'm the only daughter. I'm the only one that actually is able to be 100% independent. All three of my brothers, I love them. I don't hold anything against them, but they were not brought up to be independent. No. I'm the only one that was able to do it. What does that say? What? I'm like qalilat adab, or I'm actually a man in disguise, or whatever it is. Like, no, I'm a woman, and women have that power. We have the power to grow a human being and push it out of us, and then get up and do the same thing again.
That's the whole cognitive dissonance, right? It's like, men are powerful, men can do anything, women are weak, women can't do anything. But make him food, make his bed, do his laundry. You know what I mean? So, he's so powerful, he can do anything. Why are you asking women to do everything for him? I know, Lina, you didn't have to deal with this trauma growing up, but those of us who had brothers, this is what it was like. Do his laundry, do his everything. You know, it's always like they are the fragile little princes that constantly need to be catered to and taken care of. And then we're the weak ones.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I can see, Leora, you were wanting to chime in at that moment.
I was saying they wake you up at 3 a.m. to make their food if they come late home, or so on.
Can't even make his own sandwich, but he's so powerful.
They can't make their own breakfast.
Yeah.
Perfect. Cannot wipe their own ass.
So, Lina, did you ever have any kind of resistance? Like, did you ever, you know, the kinds of stuff that you hear, like you were talking about the diversity, inclusion, and equity idea of like, we're groups, you know, we are women from the Arab world or from the Muslim majority world, so therefore we must think like this.
Mm-hmm.
We are this shape, you know, this color, this. And so tell me about that experience. Tell me about sort of you coming up against that expectation that you're going to be a certain kind of woman, that you're going to think a certain kind of way.
Yeah, so when we talk about the one aspect of EDI, of course EDI has so many aspects, like indigenous rights or Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ plus communities. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm only talking about my category in the EDI, or the box that I was put into, which is cultural communities. So cultural communities, it feels like, I think the intentions were good. I'm not doubting that. It's just that after a couple of years now, like almost 3 years of talking and, you know, highlighting the differences and, you know, cultural differences and religious differences or whatever, it's starting to feel like it's defeating its purpose. So it feels like dividing more than including by that time. And this is like some feedback that's coming from a woman of color who is also an immigrant. So I wasn't even born and raised here. And that's how it ended up, how I feel now. Like it's talking constantly about differences and all this. It feels like it's stereotyping. It's putting people in boxes, boxing people. Like, okay, you're an immigrant, where you're from? Okay, so you belong here. That's your box. And of course, it's benefiting only the mainstream ideologies in the cultural community, or in the cultural minority, I meant. And it's completely ignoring the unique voices within this same community who happen to think differently and have different opinions. So that's how I feel. Honestly, during my long years in Canada, I had never felt that way before the EDI initiative. I had always felt I belonged. I had never paid attention to any differences. I felt one of them. Now, somehow, the message that I receive is like, okay, we love you, we respect you, we include you, we support you, but you're not us. You're something else. That's the message that comes at the end of the line, and I'm sure that's not the intention. But I feel like it's about time we moved on to the next level, perhaps, of the EDI. Like, enough talking about differences. Let's focus on our similarities, because they are 10 times more. At the end of the day, we are all human souls. Enough talking about what divides. Let's focus on what unites people,
So that's where we used to be. That's where we were before. The reason why you didn't feel it before was because our society wasn't like that before. We changed. It used to be all about, we are the same, we are together, we don't focus on our differences, we focus on our similarities. It used to be about not seeing differences, not identifying and focusing on differences, celebrating and respecting differences, but not like this almost like fetishization. And in the beginning, I used to also say, like, it's coming from a good place, but I don't think that anymore. Because we were in a good place. Like, why did we start to do this? Like, I feel like it was planned, it was purposeful. There's a reason why we started to do this. Like, what you're saying about, like, let's go back to the way we were before we started doing this DEI training, right? And I agree with you. I mean, we did it. I was teaching at a college, and we all did this kind of same thing. And everybody was put into little boxes, but at the same time, they're telling us not to stereotype. It's like, what do you think you're doing right now, though? Right? And
exactly.
So it's all very confusing, all very contradictory, and all very sort of white guilt flagellation, White men, of course, being at the top of the most horrific human beings on the planet, but white women as well, just, and they're happy. It's kind of, I think it's almost like a Christian concept to like accept this guilt. I am a sinner, and they wallow in it. They enjoy it. They're not even standing up and saying, wait a minute. Why are we talking like this?
Historically, the white race is not the only one who did this terrible things, like, go read history, even like to this day in other parts of the world.
And I mean, and even in Canada, in such a multicultural country. You were just talking about how you were able to meet people from all over the world and hear all of these different experiences of different people's religions and cultures and narratives. If you had like a potluck dinner where people were bringing food from their cultures, like imagine that in Egypt. That'd be like the most boring. Here's kushari. You know what I mean? Like everybody has the same food, everybody has the same music, everybody's the same.
I know.
I mean, in Egypt, it was really funny because I met this Pakistani couple who thought that they were like, whoo, outside the box. They're so amazing. And they thought of themselves as like an interracial couple because he was Sunni and she's Shia.
Oh.
And they're all like, woo, like we broke the barriers. Coming from Canada, that's a joke because, I'm meeting people that are like, I'm half Japanese and half Polish. And, like it is the most welcoming country.
Yeah.
And these are the people that we're sitting them down in a classroom and teaching them, no, you need to see color, you need to see race, you need to see religion, you need to see gender, you need to, like, we were doing fine. We were doing fine. And we decided to do this.
I agree.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the strategy is or how we're going to go back to the way we were, but yeah.
Definitely messed up. I just went to a women's conference actually about 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about different groups being excluded or whatnot, and how do you unite? And it was a panel that was diverse, had different races in there. But I brought up being excluded, and I literally was like, I'm not Muslim, and I'm Somali, and I'm bisexual. And before I could even finish anything, and they were like, "Oh, we have people from your community." I'm like, "What community?" And then they stopped. I couldn't even finish my thought. Like I was trying to talk about my story of being excluded. And they just talked over me, and then I had to fight to speak. And I'm like, this is a whole women's conference, and we had it just so we could all speak freely. And they were like, we're not giving you this platform. And so I kept trying to talk. And I was like, I'm not talking about what you were talking about. I'm talking about like I felt excluded. And this is one of the examples. Like I can't even speak with you guys. I couldn't get a word out. And then I kept talking about it, but I don't know. It was just odd. And they're talking about ways to unite, and then they were trying to push me away, like, no, you're going too far.
It's doing the opposite.
Yeah, and I kept telling, like, I'm literally a Somali that's not Muslim, that is bisexual. When did you ever hear that at a day conference that's even in Minnesota? So instead of like wanting to hear about it, like, hold on, this is not it. And they're kind of, and then I felt even more excluded. And I'm like, what the? You had a whole freaking program about not excluding people and uniting, and you're trying to like bash me to the side. What is that?
Is it because they couldn't figure out which box to fit you in?
Yeah. Which one? The Somali,
Yes.
the Muslim, or the
Yeah. Is that what it was? Like, is that they got confused? They're like, which?
I kept talking though. I didn't give a fuck. I went to the closer to them. I went to a seat closer to them, and I kept trying to talk about it, but it kept being like, oh, it doesn't matter and all that. And I'm just like, but this freaking seminar that we was in was all about freaking uniting and just hearing about other people's ways and how to bring people together. But you're not willing to freaking hear me, like, because everybody had a chance. That thing was like 2 hours long. We were in a small room. There's not a lot of room in there. So I'm like, why can't I share some things? And I even brought it to them. How do you bring in unity when there's somebody like me too? Because it's like I'm being ex-Muslim and being bisexual and Somali, all of that. It's like, where the heck do I fit into that? And how do we help people as a whole? It doesn't even have to be somebody that's Somali or bisexual. Just somebody so we can bring each other together. It's a freaking globe. It's a people and blah, blah, blah. But they weren't trying to do that. They don't wanted it for themselves. And I'm just like, then what was the point of the damn seminar?
Yeah. So this is like, if that seminar was meant to do good things and was meant to progress people's thinking, and if it was for a good purpose, then that wouldn't have been the situation. That wouldn't have been your experience. You know, like when we in our own communities, in the Muslim community, in the Somali community, Saudi Arabian, Egyptian, like all of Muslim majority countries, you can't voice. You will never be able to say, I am an ex-Muslim, I am bisexual. You know, both of those things will get you killed, right? And so it's like the fact that you're trying to have these seminars and this training is supposed to be so that people can express these things, and so that we can talk about these things and share the fact that we're all individuals and we all have individual ways of thinking, and none of us fit in a box. And the response to you was, you need to fit in a box.
They're like, go find another people, go find other people, or oh, we already have people like you.
Yeah, that's, oh man,
Somali,
that was the response to my book.
get this. It was in Minnesota. I live in Minnesota. There's not a lot of us. There's not fucking a lot of us, let alone bisexual women. And I'm like, okay, so now the community, Somali community, already say some shit. Now these people are here. That's in this community, that's not even Somali, is also saying things. I'm like, then, and then at the same time, they're saying unite and then find your own box.
Yeah. You know, my organization, Free Hearts, Free Minds, mainly supports, so Free Hearts, meaning LGBT community, and Free Minds, meaning ex-Muslims. And I've had so many people tell me, well, you're never going to get any kind of support, because the left will hate you because you're Islamophobic, you're supporting ex-Muslims, and the right will hate you because you're supporting LGBT. So you're never going to get mainstream support, because if you're hated by both sides. And I'm like, well, that's it. This is what we're used to. We're hated over there, we're hated over here. It's exhausting.
That's why I'm going to keep speaking at the damn conferences. I don't give two Fs. They could all go about their way. I'm going to keep speaking. I don't care.
Yeah, good for
She
you.
inspired me a lot, actually. She's my big sister. She is.
She is an inspiring woman. You're very lucky to have her.
She's an amazing forgotten feminist, this one.
Oh,
Awesome.
You
Somebody
guys-
had their, I saw there was somebody who had their hand up, but I didn't see who it was.
What's the hara, Yasmine?
Oh, sorry. I'm not even paying attention. There's a bunch of people in the waiting room. Sahara got kicked off somehow. Sorry, I got so into your story. Sorry, Sahara, I'm not sure how you got kicked off there, but please go ahead and ask Lina your question.
I'm sorry. I think it was maybe Allah or Momo.
Oh yeah, or the jinn. They're always
Oh
trying
my
to disrupt this conversation.
I know. I was just trying to get my mic something fixed, and yeah. Lina, I just want to say thank you for coming, telling your story and sharing your powerful story, especially about the mind. We are powerful within ourselves. I totally agree with you. And I think all of us, how we survive is that mind, right? In our mind and within us, that power that we fought, and we are survivors and survived that unsurvival, a lot of things that we survived. So I'm grateful you wrote the book. I can't wait to get it. And thank you. And yeah, and I was just, it's very interesting, because I do want to touch the equity and all these multiculturalism and diversity, all these, I call these words buzzing words, because they only want to hear one-sided stories and voices. And you're right, we have so much in common, and our differences make us who we are. But every human being, we do have a story. All of us have a story. It doesn't matter where you are born. And we can learn from each other. We can listen to each other. If you don't want to listen to somebody that you disagree, you don't have to. But it's hard for me to understand these people who are trying to put people in a box, because I also migrated to the United States. So just like you, I am an immigrant, somebody who came here 10 years ago, and who was illiterate. Literally, I wasn't able to write or read my own name, my first name. And here I am today. I am able to do all that because thanks to America gave me the opportunity to be the person I am today. And these people are telling me that I am a victim in America, even though, sure, I am a victim of my own people who mutilated me. I'm a survivor of female genital mutilation, and I'm glad you didn't go through. You were talking about that. So it's just very odd. These people, when you try to tell stories like this and they put you in a box and they don't want to hear about from you, and you care about the community, you like claiming all these buzzing words and, oh, I want to help a minority and all these words. But then when we speak out the abuses and the oppression within this community, why do you shut us? Why are you so coward and just like, go in the corner? Because it happened to me. I've been silent as well in the university when I start to talk about, a lot of people who are silent in this community because of the fear, and also the consequences because of living Islam is apostasy. So I think what we could do is just to continue speaking out and calling out these people are hypocrites. And I try not to dehumanize people, but when these people say like, oh no, you can't think for yourself and you need to be in this box, you are migrated here and you are being oppressed by white people, which I am not. I'm being oppressed by my own freaking people. Are you gonna talk about it, or are you gonna just get out of the way and I can talk and I don't need your whatever savior complex. You're trying to just leave us alone.
Just
and
the
we can talk.
irony of them telling you,
Yeah,
you are oppressed. No, I'm not. Yes, you are.
yeah.
Little black girl, stop arguing with me. I am a dominant white person and I am telling you, you are oppressed. Like they don't see
It's
the
insane.
whole.
It's insane. Or even like, I remember all the notion, everything was happening is, there's a lot of things. Yes, America is not perfect. The West is not perfect. Nowhere in the world is freaking perfect. But the West, there's so many people who are coming here, dying to come here. Why? Why do they want to come? Even though the West, they call it is the racist and this whole awful, why do people dying to come to this country? We do have something unique. I think that is freedom of speech, even though they're trying now to destroy everything and then trying to go backward and to do reverse of racism. Like you can be racist toward to people that you don't agree with. It's just disgusting. It's very nasty. But I think we need to talk and we need to have a conversation with these individuals. And I think some of them sadly have been brainwashed to believe that the West is evil. And the West stands for, racism and oppression, especially white men is the problem of the world. And I'm just like, what? Seriously? Are you want to talk about problem? And so I think we just need to keep speaking, and thank you for speaking. And Yasmine, what she does, we adore her. We love her. And we just continue to talk. And I don't need somebody to speak for me. We can all share our voices. Our voices are powerful. And nobody can stop us. And I'm grateful to be here, part of the No to Momo Haram group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, always love to hear from Sahara. She always brings such, fun to such dark conversations. But yeah, I completely agree with what you were saying, Sahara. And honestly, it's just very disheartening. I just want to make sure that there's nobody else that has anything else to say to Lina before we wrap up. Leora.
Yes, I just spoke a little bit, but I didn't thank you for being here, for sharing your story. It was able to relate to what you were saying, because I lived in Saudi Arabia and I'm surviving many things. But I never knew that there are Christians and Jewish people in Saudi until I was studying in an international school. And then during the religious classes, everyone would leave. And I had to come out and ask them, why did you leave? And they say, oh, we're not Muslims. And I never thought that in Saudi there are people who are not other than Muslims. That's one thing. Yeah. And so I understand how it's not fair to the others. And that's something I'm thankful for after leaving Islam, is that I'm able to look at people as just beautiful individuals that you have to love and respect regardless of their, religion in life. One thing that I also wanted to mention is about the female. Back in the day, they were worshipped. And I don't know if you read, but in Quran, they always mention uh, the three gods that the Arabs before Islam used to worship.
Oh, yeah.
So these were three gods that we always hear about in each story. They tell us that these three gods were destroyed by the Muslims. And then I found out later, after leaving the country and using my mind to think, read and have the resources to read, because everything was blocked back there. You're not allowed to question, you're not allowed to read anything other than give you. These three gods are women. So they were worshiping women before Islam came to the Arab countries. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention. I mentioned it in the chat, but I think we didn't read it.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't keep up.
Yeah, me neither.
But thank you so much. Yeah.
So thank you so much again, and I love all of you, honestly. Like it's
I do too. I love watching Forgotten Feminists. I told you before, Yasmine, it's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's that frustration of just trying to get our voices heard, and then also supporting each other, because it's kind of like what Sahara said at the end of the day, like, we don't have to wait for other people to validate us or to, we don't need some stamp of approval or authentication from anybody. We can be ourselves. We can talk to each other, and we can share with each other, and we can support each other. We can do our own thing. We don't have to wait for anybody's permission.
Share your stories nowadays to even speak the truth. I remember at the beginning, I don't know if you're aware of it, but Dr. Sharif Emil, he wrote an article about hijab being oppressive.
Oh, yes. I was quoted in that. That's the one that they tried to get him fired.
People who made a comment saying that I was oppressed wearing the hijab. And the person who was really attacked verbally by all of them, saying, oh, you shouldn't say that. And I realized that all of the females who attacked me were from background of Pakistan and countries that we hear stories about women being oppressed in. But then you come to a person who really went through it, and they share the story and how they see it as a tool of oppression. And you tell me you're not supposed to share your stories, and your experience is not valid. That's what they were telling me. But that shouldn't stop us from sharing our stories and speaking about what happened with us.
Yeah, and Leora, when you were speaking before, when you were talking about it's nice to be living in Canada and to be able to treat people as individuals, I think that when we grow up Muslim, we have so much of that othering, Muslimin, kuffar, Muslims, and then other, non-Muslims, the ones that are going to burn in hell. And there was such a focus on that, sort of what I was saying to Lina earlier, with even trying to discover who is the Christian Egyptian amongst you. Like, you always have to know where is the other. You constantly have to have that separation. And I think that's why I have such a, I'm just absolutely disgusted with this othering that's going on right now, with the constantly trying to put people in boxes. And there's women of color, which, what does that mean? Literally, what does that, can somebody, it's everyone except for white women. That's what you're trying to say,
I hate
or
that
BIPOC.
word, Yasmine, sorry.
So do
I
I.
hate that word. Oh
It
my
sounds
God.
exactly like if somebody called me a colored woman.
Absolutely
I feel as offended.
Exactly. So what have you done?
Offended.
You flipped it around, and somehow now it's a good thing. Like, if you say colored woman, it's negative and you're racist. But if you say woman of color, well, now you're a progressive and woke.
You're good.
You're on the good side of history.
Just call me Arab, God
exactly
damn
the
it.
same
That's
way.
what I am.
Or call you Ghada, like, can you just do that?
Thank you.
Can we, why do we have, and I never had any connection really. I wasn't born in Egypt. I wasn't raised in Egypt. I visited Egypt a handful of times, but because you wear the hijab on your head, and a lot of my childhood was just people assuming, that being a Muslim was so much part of my identity than I really was, or being Egyptian was so much part of my identity than I really was. And it's like, you want to be able to get rid of these identifying things that basically separate you from the rest of the society around you. And doesn't matter what I want, society is hell-bent on separating me. And like you said, Lina, of telling me, no, you are an other. Don't forget that.
And it's
You're
not just
different.
that. It's like, if you be like, and I understand it from Lina's point of view, because she grew up, as a Christian in Egypt. I grew up as a Shia in Saudi Arabia. So when we come here and then they put us in the box, like, oh, wait.
Muslim.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
Like you feel again.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like
And
you
then they
left
just-
everything and came hoping for a new life, and then again you're being put in another box.
And you
Yeah.
don't fit that box because you're not a Sunni Wahhabi from a big Gabila, you're just a normal Shia person that just, was actually discriminated against by the country, and you were a Christian that was discriminated against by her country. And now we're being like, oh.
Yeah, stop you like, hold on.
I remember the other day I was having a debate. It's like I made a comment about how women are treated in the Arab world, and then a lady comes to defend her country, and she said, "Oh, look at me! I can go in my country wearing whatever I want, and no one can harass me." So I said, "Can I know where are you from?" And she said, "Have you heard of Morocco, Egypt, and Tunisia?" And I said, "Morocco and Tunisia, we can," and Algeria. She mentioned Algeria as
Oh
well.
boy,
It's like,
these
don't
are
even
bad examples.
and don't even mention these countries, because we know that in these countries, like we're not treated as human beings, right? And someone else jumps, and I told her that I studied the Quran, I studied Ahadith Nabawiyya, and I've lived in that community for a long time, half of my life. And then someone jumps in from the apologists to say, how come are you in Muslim Arab and you're Black?
Oh, wow.
And reply to that, I said, okay, I'll just leave it there. You're ignorant. You invade our country, change our religion. You take everything away from us. You put us through a lot of trauma, and then you tell us your trauma isn't even, nothing is valid. Your experience, like, it's not important. So.
Were these people apologists? Were they Arab, Middle East? Were they from Middle Eastern?
Yes.
Wow. Speak about the, I mean, it's just the racism, a lot of things existed in our own community. We don't want to talk about, or even the racism within Islam.
Yes.
Islam, is so horrifying to every human being, but more like to Black people. You don't want to talk about that, but you're going to talk about slavery. Then let's talk about all the slavery. Right now, this slavery is happening, but they don't want to talk about that because it does not drive the narrative. And I think
two Black slaves equal one white slave when you're selling them.
Yeah. It's awful. And it's just like, that fucking box we escaped from, the box that I escaped from, that box is being used today to divide human being, to divide good people. And it's really sick.
I mean, even the division between Shias and Sunnas, growing up in Saudi, the teacher in the 5th and 4th and 6th grade will tell us stories about, because they live in Najran, if I can.
So I mean, I completely understand what you're going through. So like, Lina, when you were talking about how in school, in your own home, how you hear about them, like essentially cussing out your, the Christians, I once felt the same way in school. In school, they singled me out. I was the only Shia girl for a very long time, from 1st grade all the way until 8th grade, 7th grade. I was the only Shia girl. So it was so easy to all just like look at me while saying that. Nobody would like single me out by name, but by looking at me, obviously. And then telling me like I'm worshiping graves. I am going to definitely, I am, engaging in shirk. I'm going to hell for sure. And you know, I was also very young. This was from first grade all the way until seventh grade. And, you know, not having somebody else to at least look at you and be like, no, we're in this together. I was all on my own. And I was being bullied by the religion teachers because, you know, the religion teachers are all Sunni and they're being taught that, you know, you're essentially garbage. So it's okay to just shit on you. This is the same way that, you know, you hear them over, you know, in the speaker, you know, it goes along with Allahumma al'an al-Masihi, al-Nasara, wal-Kuffar, wal-Yahud, wal-Rafida. It's like, you know, we're on the same page. It's like, we're just not human. And it really breaks you when you grow up like that.
You told the story that we were all grew up hearing in schools about the Sunni lady who invited her Shia neighbor and she killed her and she's gonna go to Jannah for doing that. She's gonna go to heaven for doing
I heard.
That's awful.
that's something that we always heard, and everyone is just there. They don't speak about that slavery that's happening there or discrimination.
But then when they want to talk about how many Muslims there are in the world,
They're 2
then
billion.
they're happy to include Shia at
Are
that
2
point,
billion? Are
or the
that 2
Ahmadi that
billion
they
fall
kill.
over?
Yeah, at that point, they're happy to include all the groups that they have nothing but hate and disdain for.
Yasmin, I want to say something. So I wonder if that 2 billion really fall over because of the fear.
No, most of us are
That-
ex-Muslim, first of all.
Yeah, they are.
Iran is like entirely ex-Muslim.
Yeah.
First and foremost. Saudi Arabia is not far behind. You can just imagine how many of us are in like Pakistan and Sudan and Somalia and all these countries. You can't hear their voices. You should see the emails that we get for Free Hearts, Free Minds. Countries I'm like, there are Muslims there? I didn't even know. Like we're everywhere, but people are too afraid to speak up. And like Lina said too, it's written in your ID card and you couldn't change it even if you wanted to. So a lot of people are being marked as
Christian to Muslim.
Yeah, that's no problem. But I mean, if you're a Muslim and you want to change your religion to something else, you can't. And so a lot of these people are walking around with Muslim, legally they're Muslim on their ID cards. It says they're Muslim. They can be counted in the census as Muslim, but they're not. They could be Christian, they could be atheist, they could have, you know, converted to some other religion, but we can't know that.
But let's not forget about that. It's not only fear that prevents them from talking, because I see a lot of the new Islamic version that's going on now. Like everything is okay. We love the LGBTQ community and we're peaceful and all that stuff, but they don't know about the religion that's practiced in the real Muslim countries until this day. And now I think Qatar, with what's happening there, you kind of tell and you can see what do they believe in. It's like just oppressing other people. And then when we come to your country, we need you to change your whole culture just to fit us. So when they come here, they tell you, oh, I want the opportunity or the right to wear my hijab. And then when you go to their country, they tell you, oh, you're obligated to wear your hijab and you have to respect our culture. It's like double standards that I don't understand.
I love that it's all coming out with the World Cup. It's beautiful because I've been saying this. I lived in Qatar for like 8 years and I shared those pictures. Reflect your respect. They have it in the malls, big, huge signs in the malls. Because of course there's a lot of expats, just like there are in Saudi Arabia. Big signs up in the malls telling women what to wear and, you know, stopping them too. Like it's not like a religious police, but there will be people. There's a lot of women that will tell off other women if they're not dressed appropriately. It happens all the time, and not just in Qatar. This happens in Canada. This happens all, like, this policing of each other is a thing. But you're absolutely correct, Leora, with the double standard. Then they come here in the Western world, and then they demand that the culture change to fit them. But you try to go to one of their countries and see how it is. Like Sahara was saying, people are killing themselves trying to come to the West. Nobody's killing themselves trying to go to Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan. Right?
True.
You know, there's a
Or
reason why.
China, why don't you go
Exactly.
China? Yeah, why don't you go
Yeah.
China, Asian country? Like, you don't, but then you bash about the West. The West is horrible. They're this kuffar, but you benefiting from it. You know, you practice polygamy here, even in the West.
Yeah.
But you always, is the West. It's always the West fault. Even if you break your nose, it must be the white man. It's the West. You know,
Or the
it's
Jews.
sick. Yeah, it was the Jews, right? Take responsibility.
Yes.
Do your thing. And it's just like, I think we are the tsunami, you know. We
Yeah.
are, so many of us, that 2 billion, I don't believe it, are Muslim.
No.
We are
I
the
agree.
tsunami, and we're not going to be silent. And
Mhm.
F the rest. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Iran and Qatar are really helping with getting our message out there to the world. Those Iranian women, I mean, they're doing an amazing job.
I love
Qatar
them.
are not doing it on purpose, but they are helping us.
I always wonder, I always find it weird that the non-Muslim countries, they will bring the Muslim to their countries, and then they will open a mosque and they, oh, this is your place to worship your God. But they don't know that these Muslims are praying for your country to
Yeah.
be Allahumma kufar wal mushrikeen wa azz al-Islam.
Yeah. 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 Nasreen.
Hi guys. It's so nice to be here after so long, and I'm sorry I joined late and I was not able to listen to Lina. Had another meeting, but I'm so glad I made it. And to what Leo just said, I mean, that's exactly what happens. And wait, sorry, I'm blanking out a little bit. But also with the Iranian protest, it's something that's been like really, I don't know, optimistic feeling for me lately. And so another thing, I don't know if I've ever mentioned before, but I grew up in a very sort of Salafist teachers, you know, amongst them. And so I still have a lot of conditioning ingrained in me. And I just recently went to Umrah with my mom. I still have some feelings of God. I don't know, it's a lot of conflicting stuff, but whatever, I'm still trying to work it out. But I just wanted to say there's a lot of change in Saudi as well. And I just feel like, you know, hopefully even with Iran, with Saudi as well, a lot of things soon start to change. And yes, with what Leora was saying, and with what also I also wrote about, I know a lot of really religious people who immigrate, and then they start complaining about, oh, I'm just doing this for, you know, economic reasons, but it's actually not halal. You know, I should come hijrah back to Islamic countries. But then they actually go there, and like she said, they're actually wishing for destruction of the kafir and the kafir lands, but they're enjoying all of the benefits and all of the awesome, you know, freedoms that they get there. But then this is what they're actually thinking, and contradictory, even probably teaching their kids, because unfortunately, a lot of kids who grow up there turn out to be a lot more extremist than even those who grew up in Islamic countries.
Yes. That is a very sad truth. People just always assume that just because your kids are, I don't know, they assume that when people move to the West from other countries, that somehow their entire value system and their whole entire ideology and moral compass is going to completely change because they're in a different geographic location. Like, people don't change. These ideas travel in their minds. These ideas don't have borders, you know? And then, like you said, when they're in what it was for me, I'll talk about my example, and I'm sure you've seen it all over the Western world. When you're in a non-Muslim country, when you're surrounded by kuffar, you're surrounded by these evil ideas of like liberalism and equality and feminism, then they double down even more on their kids, you know, and force them to go to the Islamic schools and study and memorize and this and that even more than they would if they were in a Muslim majority country where they're swimming in a sea of Islam everywhere that they look anyway. So the parents don't have to push so hard. And yeah, that ends up creating extremists. And we saw that with ISIS. When ISIS came to being, you had all these people from like Germany, UK, Canada, like all over the world, suddenly burning their passports and running to join these terrorists. You know, why would they do that? How did that happen so quickly? You know, they were groomed over the internet. No, nobody gets groomed that quickly. We were groomed from the moment we were born. We were groomed from day one, being told constantly that this was our mission, that Islam would rise, the caliphate would rise, and that we would have to join and kill the kuffar. That's what it's all about. Yes, Leora.
I don't know, Lina, but my brother joined ISIS, and unfortunately he lost his life. And I was talking about this the other day because there's this, what's his name? Dr. Naik something. He's
Oh my God.
diet. And then they were sharing something about what he used to say back then and now how he changed his speech completely. So he used to say that football is haram, and now he's in Qatar asking people, trying to convert as many kuffar as possible. But it shows you that how they changed their speech through the years, saying that when the Caliphate came out and everyone was so happy, and now they're saying, oh, people should not join them. But back then you were telling everyone, and my brother heard you say that, oh, this is what's going to take you to Jannah or heaven is by joining ISIS. And now you tell me, no, this is not right, you shouldn't join it. So you're just wondering, so my brother lost his life because you don't even know what you're talking about, right? And just to see them now changing everything. One of them, a well-known Saudi person, I don't know if you know him, but he also a da'iya, and he's just changing his clothes, and he's wearing like kuffar's clothes, and he's riding a bicycle and saying, oh, this is the life, it's okay to do that, a Muslim is allowed to do all of that. But in my mind, when were you before? When my brother and many other of our youth were listening to you and following whatever you say. So what are they going to do about that? Right? And it's still going. It's not the end. ISIS is not over. It's not. It's still there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know if it's ever going to be over. It just keeps morphing. It'll just keep changing names or whatever, but it's always going to be there, always trying to get stronger and rear its ugly head. And when it's powerful, you will find all the Muslims standing behind them. But when it's weak, that's when the Muslims denounce them and say, actually, no. Yeah. Okay, so we have taken almost 2 hours of your time, Lina. I told Lina we might go like 15, 20 minutes extra, but like we just went off on every tangent.
Thank you all so much. I am so happy to be here today.
Thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you for sharing all of your perspectives and your comments and your stories. Lina, I wanted to give you the last word before we say goodbye. I just want to make sure that there isn't anything that you wanted to say, or I just wanted to allow you the opportunity to conclude.
Thank you so much. I can't think of anything really, except one thing I would like to say to every woman and every girl out there. You are way more than you think you are. That's it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I hope they all hear you. Thank you so much, Lina. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Such an honor to share this time with you. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.